Good morning, boys and girls. Are you so excited to read more of Flora and Ulysses? I know that I am. We are reading Chapter 7 today. Chapter 7 is The Soul of a Squirrel. The squirrel was a little unsteady on his feet. His brain felt larger, roomier, as if it was as if several doors in the dark room of itself, doors he hadn't even known existed, had suddenly been flung wide open. Everything was shot through with meaning, purpose, light. However, the squirrel was still a squirrel, and he was hungry. Very. Who can say what astonishments are hidden inside the most mundane being? So here are the pictures. I'll show you this picture first if I can get it in there. Whoops. Okay. And that was chapter 7. So, in chapter 7, the squirrel's brain feels big. It feels like there's doors in there that he didn't even know existed, and now they're open. But he's still a squirrel, and he's still hungry. Because if you remember from the beginning of the story, squirrels think about food. So, the first thing that you have to do is up here is explain the changes the squirrel felt. And then down here it says, some things never change. How does this saying fit the squirrel's behavior in this chapter? I did kind of just talk about that. Some things never change. How does that fit the squirrel? Go ahead and pause the video here so that way you can complete chapter 7's page. And I'm going to try to flip to my page 8 and then I will read chapter 8. All right. Chapter 8 does have vocabulary. So before I read, I want you to find the definitions, write the definition, and then draw a picture. And then we will read helpful information. In this chapter, the squirrel gets his name. What do you think his name is going to be? Let's see. Chapter 8, Helpful Information. Flora and Miss Tickman noticed at the same time. The squirrel, said Flora. The vacuum cleaner, said Miss Tickman. Together they stared at the Ulysses 2000X and at the squirrel who was holding it over his head with one paw. That can't be, said Miss Tickman. The squirrel shook the vacuum cleaner. That can't be, said Miss Tickman. You already said that, said Flora. I'm repeating myself? You're repeating yourself. Maybe I have a brain tumor, said Miss Tickman. It was certainly possible that Miss Tickman had a brain tumor. Flora knew from reading Terrible Things Can Happen to You that a surprising number of people were walking around with tumors in their brains and didn't even know it. That was the thing about tragedy. It was just sitting there, keeping you company, waiting. And you had absolutely no idea this was the kind of helpful information you could get from the comics if you paid attention. In the other kind of information that you absorb from the regular reading of comics, the most particularly from the regular reading of The Illuminated Adventures of Amazing Incandesto, was that impossible things happen all the time. For instance, heroes, superheroes, were born of ridiculously and unlikely circumstances, spider bites, chemical spills, planetary dislocation, and, in the case of Alfred T. Slipper, from accidental submersion in an industrial-sized vat of cleaning solution called Incandesto, the cleaning professional's hard-working friend. I don't think you have a brain tumor, said Flora. There might be another explanation. Uh-huh, said Miss Tickman. What's the other explanation? Have you ever heard of Incandesto? What? Said Miss Tickman. Who? Said Flora. Incandesto is a who. He's a superhero. Right, said Miss Tickman. And your point is? Flora raised her hand. She pointed with a single finger at the squirrel. Surely you are not implying, said Miss Tickman. The squirrel lowered the vacuum cleaner to the ground. He held himself very still. He considered both of them. His whiskers twitched and trembled. There were cracker crumbs on his head. He was a squirrel. Could he be a superhero too? Alfred T. Slipper was a janitor. Most of the time people looked right past him. Sometimes, often in fact, they treated him with disdain. They had no idea of the astonishing acts of heroism and blinding light contained within his outward humdrum disguise. Only Alfred's parakeet Dolores knew who he was and what he could do. The world will misunderstand him, said Flora. You bet it will, said Miss Tickman. Tooty, shouted Miss Tickman from the back door. Tooty, I'm hungry. Tooty? What a ridiculous name. Flora couldn't resist the urge to say it out loud. Tooty, she said. Tooty Tickman. Listen, Tooty, go inside, feed your husband. Say nothing to him or to anyone else about any of this. Right, said Tooty. Say nothing. Feed my husband. Okay, right. She began walking slowly towards the house. Mr. Tickman called out, Are you done vacuuming? What about the Ulysses? Are you just going to leave it sitting there? Ulysses, whispered Flora. She felt a shiver run from the back of her head to the base of her spine. She might be a natural-born cynic, but she knew the right word when she heard it. Ulysses, she said again. She bent down and held out her hand to the squirrel. Come here, Ulysses, she said. And that is the end of Chapter 8. So looking at Chapter 8, the first question says the squirrel's name is. What is the squirrel's name? What did she name him? She said, come here, who, at the end of the chapter. How did Flora come up with his name? You're going to write a sentence or two here about how Flora came up with his name. Flora believes the squirrel might be a superhero, might be incandesto. Explain why she believes this. So down here you're going to talk about relating this to the comic that she was reading and how incandesto relates or is similar to Ulysses and how she came up with that idea. Okay, and then you are done for today. We're going to start with Chapter 9 on Wednesday. Have a good day, guys.